The equation alien mathematicians declared impossible, solved by a human at lunch, HFY. The hall of the Galactic Mathematical Council was unlike anything Alina Hayes had ever seen. Towering crystal structures floated in midair, glowing with colors she had no names for. Streams of numbers twisted through the air like ribbons of light, rearranging themselves endlessly. Alien mathematicians from dozens of different planets filled the hall, each one focused on the same impossible goal: solving the equation that had baffled the galaxy for centuries. Alina, one of the few humans invited to the council, sat quietly at a corner table, a simple lunch tray in front of her. Sandwich in hand, she watched the aliens with fascination. Some had three eyes that rotated independently. Others had long, thin limbs that moved faster than her eyes could follow. They scribbled symbols on floating boards, whispered in languages that sounded like music and wind, and tapped on devices that pulsed with strange energy. The equation itself was displayed in the center of the room on a massive, holographic board. It was enormous, spanning nearly 30 feet in height and width, made of shifting symbols that changed as if alive. The council called it the ultimate equation, claiming it held the secrets of space, time, and the fundamental patterns of the universe. Yet no being, no matter how intelligent, had ever solved it. Centuries of attempts had ended in frustration, and some species had even abandoned hope entirely. Alina picked up her sandwich and took a slow bite, ignoring the murmurs of aliens as they argued over theories. They had spent hours, days, even years of preparation to tackle the problem. She had come with nothing but her human curiosity and a simple notebook, yet there was something about the chaos in the symbols that felt familiar. The aliens didn't notice her at first. They were too busy debating. A tall, four-armed mathematician with translucent skin waved each limb dramatically as he shouted equations in rapid succession. A small, glowing being floated near the ceiling, producing bursts of light whenever it spoke, as if each pulse carried a weight of meaning beyond comprehension. The air was thick with energy, tension, and a kind of electric excitement that made Alina's stomach flutter. She watched, quietly analyzing the movements of the symbols. Every time the aliens tried a new approach, the equation twisted and changed in response. It was as if it were alive, testing them, rejecting solutions, laughing at their arrogance. Alina noticed something that no alien seemed to see. Amid the complexity, there were simple repeating patterns, tiny symmetries hidden in the chaos, little bridges between numbers and symbols that seemed too small, too subtle for the aliens' minds to catch. Her human mind worked differently. Years of trial and error, solving problems in labs, tinkering with ideas, had trained her to see patterns where others saw only noise. She set down her sandwich and opened her notebook. On its blank pages, she began to sketch shapes and connections, using letters and numbers, arrows and diagrams. At first, the lines seemed meaningless, just doodles. But slowly, the patterns began to reveal themselves. One of the alien mathematicians noticed her scribbling. "Why is the human interfering?" it hissed, its voice a strange mix of clicks and hums. Others glanced at her, eyebrows, or the alien equivalent raised. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Humans had never solved anything remotely as complex as the ultimate equation. Their logic was considered simple, their minds linear, their methods quaint. Yet here she was, sitting quietly, drawing patterns that no alien had noticed. Alina ignored them. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was simply curious. And curiosity, she had learned long ago, often led to answers no amount of intelligence alone could reach. Hours passed. The aliens grew increasingly frustrated. Arguments broke out. Some blamed the equation itself, claiming it had evolved to resist any solution. Others blamed each other, accusing colleagues of misinterpreting symbols. The hall buzzed with tension, the air thick with the scent of ozone, and the faint tang of energy flowing through their devices. Meanwhile, Alina's notebook began to fill with shapes and numbers that seemed to whisper their secrets. She noticed a pattern that repeated every 7 symbols, but only if she ignored certain layers that the aliens insisted were essential. The aliens had overcomplicated the problem, adding unnecessary layers, assuming that more complexity meant more depth. Humans, however, often found simplicity in chaos. She paused to take another bite of her sandwich, then tilted her head, thinking. Perhaps the solution wasn't in brute force calculations. Perhaps it wasn't in the elaborate formulas the aliens loved. Perhaps it was in intuition, in seeing the connections that no one else dared to notice. Alina's fingers flew across her notebook, connecting lines, circling symbols, drawing arrows between parts of the equation that seemed unrelated. Each connection felt right. Each line brought clarity. She felt the pulse of the equation, almost as if it were alive, almost as if it responded to her in ways no alien tool could detect. The aliens began to notice her progress. Stop. That human is distracting herself with nonsense. One shouted, its voice echoing like thunder across the hall. Another floated closer, inspecting her notebook. Its glowing form pulsed rapidly as it scanned her work. Impossible, it said, in a tone that mixed awe and disbelief. No human could understand the ultimate equation. Alina smiled faintly. She did not speak. She didn't need to. Words were slow, clumsy tools compared to the clarity of the pattern she could see. Night fell outside the hall's enormous transparent walls, revealing distant galaxies spinning in the darkness. Inside, the aliens continued their frantic calculations, but Alina worked in calm silence. She rested for a moment, looking at her simple doodles, and realized something extraordinary. She had already done what the aliens could not. The solution was forming in her mind. Not the entire solution yet, but the path, the bridge that would allow the final steps to appear. Her human mind worked differently, yes. It made mistakes, it stumbled, it sometimes ignored rules the aliens considered sacred. But it also saw connections no alien logic could reach. Humans were unpredictable, flexible, and driven by a strange mixture of curiosity, stubbornness, and creativity. That unpredictability was their greatest strength. By now, some aliens had begun to gather around her. They didn't understand what she was doing, but even their advanced senses detected the strange resonance of her ideas. A shimmer of energy seemed to radiate from her notebook. A few older, wiser mathematicians frowned, muttering to themselves. "She is not supposed to see this," one whispered. Alina ignored them. She picked up her pen, poised it over the paper, and drew a single line connecting 2 symbols. It was simple, almost childlike, but in that line lay the key. The room seemed to shift. Lights flickered. Numbers pulsed in rhythm as if acknowledging her insight. The aliens looked around, alarmed and curious. Something was happening, something they did not understand. For Alina, it was only a tiny step toward understanding the impossible. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, feeling the thrill of discovery. The ultimate equation, long considered unsolvable, was beginning to reveal its secrets, and it had chosen, for reasons no one could explain, a human to see them first. In that moment, with her lunch forgotten and her mind fully immersed, Alina understood something fundamental. Intelligence alone does not make one capable of solving the universe's greatest puzzles. Curiosity, persistence, and the courage to see what no one else notices, these were the true keys. And humans, in their imperfect, messy, unpredictable way, had them in abundance. The night deepened, and the hall of the Galactic Mathematical Council buzzed with tension, anticipation, and confusion. Aliens continued their calculations, oblivious to the tiny, quiet human in the corner, whose notebook now held the faint outlines of what might be the greatest discovery in the galaxy. And so, with a simple line drawn on a napkin, humanity quietly began to take its first step toward proving that even against the most advanced minds in the universe, they could achieve the impossible. The next morning, the Galactic Mathematical Council Hall glowed with a pale light as distant stars reflected through its transparent walls. Alina Hayes arrived early, her lunch neatly packed but forgotten in the excitement of the previous night. The aliens were already busy, gathering around their massive holographic boards, muttering in complex languages, and gesturing at numbers that twisted and shifted like living things. Alina took her usual corner seat. She opened her notebook, flipping to the page where she had begun mapping the equation's hidden patterns. Her human intuition told her there was more to discover. The first line she drew had opened a small door, but behind it, the equation sprawled endlessly like a galaxy, each symbol connected in ways no alien had yet considered. Around her, the aliens were loud and anxious. The tall, four-armed mathematician had gathered a team of assistants, all working frantically to untangle the equation. The small, glowing alien floated near the ceiling, pulsing light rapidly, as though its nervous energy might crack the air itself. They were calculating, projecting, adjusting, and testing, but the solution remained stubbornly out of reach. Alina watched them carefully. She noticed something strange. Each time the aliens tried a complex manipulation, the equation resisted them. But whenever she returned to her simple patterns, a small part of the equation seemed to align. It was subtle, a tiny shimmer of harmony in the chaotic numbers, but she could see it, and she knew she had to follow it. Taking a clean sheet of paper, Alina began to write down the symbols in a new way. She ignored the layers the aliens considered essential and focused only on the patterns she could see emerging. Slowly, shapes began to appear, like constellations forming in the night sky. She drew connecting lines between numbers, symbols, and functions, creating a map that revealed relationships no alien model had detected. A few aliens drifted closer, curious but cautious. "The human is drawing nonsense," one whispered to another. Its voice sounded like wind whistling through thin pipes. "She cannot possibly see anything. The ultimate equation is beyond her species." Alina did not reply. She did not need to. Her mind was focused entirely on the problem. She had learned long ago that words often slowed down the thought process. Insight, creativity, and understanding came faster when ideas were allowed to flow freely, without interruption. As she worked, Alina noticed something even more surprising. The equation, which had seemed so rigid and unchanging, responded to her patterns. Not in a conscious way, of course, but as if her observations revealed a natural order that had been hidden all along. Every time she connected two symbols, a small part of the holographic board pulsed lightly. It was almost imperceptible, but she felt it in her chest like a faint heartbeat. Her mind raced. The aliens had assumed that the solution required unimaginable calculations and high-speed quantum processing. They had ignored intuition, creativity, and the power of simple observation. Humans, on the other hand, often solved problems through trial and error, through curiosity, through the willingness to explore paths no one else considered. That was her advantage. Hours passed. The aliens continued their complex calculations, occasionally glancing at Alina with suspicion. Some shook their heads, muttering about human inefficiency. But a few, older and wiser, paused longer, observing quietly. There was something different in her approach. Something elegant and simple that the aliens could not immediately understand. Alina picked up a pen and began to test a theory. She had noticed a small repetition in the symbols, a rhythm that seemed to repeat every 7 steps. It was easy to overlook, but it could hold the key. She drew a series of arrows linking these repeating patterns, carefully noting how they interacted with other parts of the equation. With each connection, a tiny pulse of light spread through the holographic board. The tall, four-armed mathematician noticed the change. "What is she doing?" it shouted. "Stop, that human is interfering." Its arms waved wildly, knocking over small devices in frustration. But Alina did not stop. She continued to trace the lines, her mind forming connections that the aliens had ignored. By mid-afternoon, the hall was tense. Aliens whispered, argued, and gestured, but none could find the solution. Meanwhile, Alina had created a map of the equation that seemed to simplify its complexity rather than increase it. She began to see a pattern forming, a bridge between the equation's layers that no one had noticed. It was subtle, delicate, but unmistakable. Alina leaned back in her chair, staring at her notebook. Her human mind worked differently, yes. It made mistakes. It stumbled. It sometimes ignored rules that others considered sacred, but it also found connections no alien logic could reach. Creativity and intuition were her tools, and for the first time they seemed to be paying off. A small crowd of aliens gathered near her. Some were fascinated, some suspicious, some incredulous. "She sees something we cannot," whispered one. "Impossible." "No human could understand the ultimate equation," muttered another. But the evidence was clear. The holographic board pulsed with subtle light whenever Alina's lines connected the right symbols. Alina smiled faintly. She did not need recognition or praise. Her goal was understanding, pure and simple. She returned to her work, tracing a series of paths that connected repeating patterns to other parts of the equation. Slowly, her insight began to reveal a structure beneath the chaos, a hidden order that had been invisible to even the most brilliant alien minds. She paused to reflect. Humans often approached problems differently from aliens. Aliens relied on precision, computation, and complexity. Humans relied on curiosity, experimentation, and intuition. Both approaches were valid, but in this case, intuition was the key. By allowing herself to follow the patterns her mind naturally noticed, Alina was discovering what others could not. As the day wore on, she began to write down possible solutions. They were not final, not yet, but they represented a path forward. Each step she took seemed to resonate with the equation, making it align slightly, like a puzzle piece finally finding its place. The aliens were growing uneasy. Some whispered to each other, exchanging nervous glances. "Could it be that a human will solve it?" one asked hesitantly. Others shook their heads, refusing to consider the possibility. But a few could not hide their curiosity. They floated closer, observing Alina's movements, trying to understand what she was doing. Alina noticed their presence but did not change her work. She had learned that interference often distracted her thinking. Instead, she focused on the symbols, on the hidden rhythms and connections she had discovered. Slowly, a faint pattern emerged, an elegant, simple structure that no alien mind had uncovered. By evening, the hall was quiet except for the hum of devices and the soft rustle of papers. Alina had filled several pages with her observations and preliminary solutions. She looked at her work and realized something extraordinary. She had uncovered a path that could lead to the solution. It was not complete, but it was a beginning. For the first time in centuries, the ultimate equation seemed approachable. The aliens, brilliant as they were, had ignored simplicity in favor of complexity. Alina's human approach, curiosity, persistence, and intuition, was proving to be more powerful than their advanced computation. She leaned back in her chair, exhausted but exhilarated. A human had done what no alien had managed. She had begun to see the impossible. The equation, long considered unsolvable, had finally revealed a hint of its secrets. And Alina knew, deep in her mind, that this was only the beginning. Night fell over the Galactic Mathematical Council once more. The stars shone brightly through the walls, distant galaxies swirling in patterns that echoed the very equation Alina was working on. The aliens continued their work, unaware that a human had glimpsed a path they had missed. Alina closed her notebook for a moment, looking around the hall. She smiled faintly. It was strange, almost humorous, that the fate of centuries rested on the intuition of a single human. But humans were like that, messy, unpredictable, and brilliant in ways no one could anticipate. And in the quiet corner of the council hall, Alina Hayes was about to prove it once again. With renewed determination, she picked up her pen and returned to her work. The ultimate equation pulsed before her eyes, waiting to reveal its secrets. And for the first time, someone had a path forward. A human path. The morning sun streamed through the transparent walls of the Galactic Mathematical Council Hall, casting pale streaks of light across the floor. The aliens were already awake, their forms floating or moving rapidly as they prepared for another day of calculation and debate. Yet in the corner, Alina Hayes sat quietly, notebook open, lunch tray untouched, her mind alive with possibilities. The previous day had revealed something extraordinary. While the aliens had been trapped in layers of complex computation, Alina had found hidden patterns, subtle repetitions and connections that no one else had noticed. Now she faced the next challenge, testing whether her insights could actually lead to a solution. It was one thing to see patterns, another to confirm them. Alina carefully organized her notes, laying out her sketches and arrows in logical sequences. She traced each connection with her pen, double-checking her reasoning. Her mind worked quickly, flowing from one idea to the next, adjusting, refining, and connecting. A human approach, intuitive, flexible, and creative, was her greatest advantage. She did not need complex devices or alien technology. Her notebook, a simple pen, and her mind were enough. Around her, the aliens were loud and impatient. The four-armed mathematician shouted commands to assistants, pointing at holographic projections that twisted numbers faster than any human could follow. The small, glowing alien floated above, pulsing light so rapidly it was almost dizzying. They were consumed by their own complexity, convinced that only computation and advanced devices could solve the ultimate equation. Alina ignored them. She had learned that distraction was the enemy of insight. Instead, she focused on the simple pattern she had discovered, following her intuition wherever it led. She noticed that certain symbols, when connected in a specific way, created a resonance, a subtle vibration across the holographic board. It was delicate, almost invisible, but she could feel it. It was the equation acknowledging her approach. Her fingers moved with confidence. She drew a bold line connecting two distant parts of the equation, linking symbols that the aliens had long ignored as irrelevant. As soon as she did, a faint pulse of light spread across the central holographic display. The aliens stopped mid-calculation, their attention drawn to the unexpected phenomenon. "What did the human do?" one hissed, its voice a strange mixture of clicks and hums. Others floated closer, curiosity mixed with alarm. The holographic numbers shimmered and aligned subtly along Alina's lines. It was not the complete solution yet, but it was proof that she was on the right track. Alina took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew this next step was risky. The aliens were watching closely, and any mistake could discredit her. But she had learned that breakthroughs rarely came without risk. She connected more symbols, this time forming a bridge across multiple sections of the equation. The resonance strengthened and the pulsing light on the board became brighter. Some aliens muttered in disbelief. "This is impossible," one said. "No human could understand the ultimate equation." Others were silent, their glowing forms flickering nervously. A few older, wiser mathematicians observed quietly, their multiple eyes narrowing in thought. There was something elegant in Alina's approach, something they could not fully comprehend. Alina smiled faintly. She did not seek praise or recognition. She only wanted understanding. The pattern she had traced was simple yet powerful, connecting elements in a way that no alien mind had tried. Her human creativity was showing its strength, curiosity, observation, and intuition, combined in a way that was unpredictable and effective. Hours passed. Alina continued to test her ideas, making small adjustments, refining her lines, and watching the equation respond. Each successful connection caused a pulse of light to ripple across the board. The aliens grew anxious. Some whispered to each other, others gestured frantically, trying to replicate her actions with their complex calculations. But nothing worked. Only her human intuition seemed to make a difference. Finally, Alina paused. She had created a complete bridge across a significant portion of the equation. It was not the final solution, but it was proof that the impossible could be approached. The resonance from the holographic board was steady now, responding to her notebook's lines in a way that made the room hum with energy. The aliens were shocked. "She has connected the layers," one shouted, arms waving wildly. Another floated closer, scanning her notebook. Its glowing form pulsed rapidly, as though it could not believe what it was seeing. The older mathematicians exchanged worried glances. This was not supposed to happen. No human had ever influenced the ultimate equation in such a way. Alina took a moment to reflect. Humans often approached problems differently from aliens. Aliens relied on computation, precision, and advanced devices. Humans relied on creativity, experimentation, and intuition. Both approaches were valuable, but in this case, intuition was revealing what computation could not. She decided to test her bridge further. Picking up a clean sheet of paper, she redrew the connections, this time adding new elements she had noticed overnight. Small repetitions, subtle symmetries, and hidden relationships, all ignored by the aliens, were now included. She traced each line carefully, watching how the holographic symbols responded. The response was immediate. The board pulsed with a steady glow, numbers aligning in sequences that had never appeared before. Aliens gasped. The four-armed mathematicians' assistants froze, their calculations interrupted. The glowing alien above twitched erratically, its pulsing light becoming chaotic. The equation itself seemed to acknowledge Alina's human approach. "Impossible," whispered one alien. "No species should be able to do this." Yet the evidence was undeniable. The lines she drew, simple and intuitive, were making the equation reveal its hidden structure. Alina smiled again, quietly thrilled. She did not boast or celebrate. Instead, she continued her work, connecting more symbols and testing new relationships. Her mind was alert, creative, and focused. She could feel the momentum building. The ultimate equation, long considered unsolvable, was slowly yielding to her human insight. By mid-afternoon, a small crowd of aliens had gathered around her. Some were skeptical, some afraid, and a few, the most curious, watched silently. They did not fully understand her method, but even they could see that it was working. The resonance on the board had grown stronger, and the numbers and symbols began to form patterns visible to the naked eye for the first time. Alina's human approach, simple observation, trial and error, and bold experimentation, was proving more effective than the aliens' advanced computation. She had discovered something they had overlooked for centuries. Sometimes, simplicity and creativity were more powerful than complexity and precision. She paused for a moment, reflecting on her progress. The equation was still not fully solved, but the path was clear. The bridge she had created connected multiple layers in a way that made sense, revealing relationships the aliens had ignored. The ultimate equation was no longer a mysterious wall of numbers. It was a puzzle she could begin to untangle. The aliens were tense. Some whispered among themselves, trying to rationalize the situation. "Could it be, a human will solve it?" one asked nervously. Others shook their heads, refusing to believe it, but a few could not hide their curiosity. They floated closer, watching her every move, trying to learn from her method. Alina did not notice them. Her focus was entirely on the equation, on the patterns, and on the subtle clues it provided. She connected one final line for the day, linking a series of repeating symbols across multiple layers. The holographic board pulsed brightly, and a ripple of energy spread through the hall. For the first time, the ultimate equation seemed to respond directly to a human mind. She leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. A single human, using nothing but intuition and observation, had made progress that no alien had managed for centuries. It was a small victory, but it was proof that humans could achieve the impossible. The hall quieted as the aliens absorbed what had happened. Some were angry, some were amazed, and some were deeply curious. Alina packed her notebook carefully, her mind already racing with ideas for the next day. She knew this was only the beginning. The ultimate equation, long thought unsolvable, was beginning to reveal its secrets, and the galaxy was watching a human take the first bold steps towards solving it. Alina smiled faintly, thinking about the path ahead. She would continue her work, step by step, line by line, and pattern by pattern. Human creativity, curiosity, and courage had opened the door. Now it was time to walk through it. The hall of the Galactic Mathematical Council buzzed with an unusual energy. Alina Hayes arrived early, her notebook carefully tucked under her arm, her mind already racing with ideas. Overnight, her insights had formed a clearer picture of the ultimate equation. What had seemed like scattered, impossible symbols now hinted at a hidden order, an order no alien mind had fully grasped. Alina opened her notebook and spread out her sketches. She had refined her lines, connected more patterns, and discovered symmetries that were almost beautiful in their simplicity. Each connection, each repetition, seemed to resonate with the equation itself. She could feel it, not as numbers or symbols, but as a rhythm, a pulse, a subtle hum of understanding. The aliens were already busy. Some hovered near the central holographic board, tapping at floating symbols and projecting streams of numbers into the air. The four-armed mathematician barked orders to assistants, gesturing wildly at sequences that refused to make sense. The glowing alien above pulsed nervously, its light flickering rapidly, almost as if it sensed the tension in the room. Alina ignored them. She had learned that alien chaos often obscured what mattered most. Her human approach required focus, patience, and a willingness to see connections others overlooked. She had already begun to understand how the equation reacted to her intuition, and today, she planned to test the most daring idea yet. She laid out her latest drawings. Lines connected distant symbols, arrows indicated subtle relationships, and small notes explained the rhythm she had discovered. The pattern was no longer random. It was a map, a key that could unlock the ultimate equation. Taking a deep breath, Alina picked up her pen and prepared to transfer her human insight into action. She began connecting symbols on the central holographic board. Slowly at first, then with increasing confidence, she traced lines that mirrored the patterns in her notebook. As she did, the numbers and symbols responded. Tiny lights flickered along the connections, pulsing in harmony with her movements. The aliens froze. Some gasped, others muttered in disbelief. The four-armed mathematician's arms froze mid-gesture, assistants staring in shock. Even the glowing alien above seemed unsettled, its pulsing light irregular and uneven. For centuries, they had believed the equation to be beyond comprehension. Yet here, in the hands of a human, it was responding. Alina felt a thrill. She did not need applause or recognition. Her reward was understanding. The equation was revealing its secrets slowly but surely in response to her intuition. Step by step, she traced the lines, connecting patterns, observing responses, and adjusting her approach. As the day passed, the small pulses of light became brighter and steadier. Patterns emerged that had never been seen before. Symbols aligned in ways the aliens had considered impossible. Repetitions and symmetries appeared clearly for the first time. It was a revelation. The ultimate equation, long thought unsolvable, was beginning to make sense. A crowd of aliens had gathered around her. Some whispered nervously to each other, their voices like wind through hollow pipes. "How can she do this?" one hissed. No human could possibly understand. Others were silent, eyes fixed on her work. Even the most experienced mathematicians seemed unsure how to react. Elena continued, her mind focused entirely on the equation. She did not rush, but each movement was deliberate. She noticed subtle shifts in the board's light, indicating that the connections she traced were correct. Slowly, she was guiding the equation into alignment, revealing a structure that had been hidden from the galaxy for centuries. She paused to consider a particularly complex section. The symbols there were dense, layered, and intertwined. The aliens had attempted multiple approaches, all of which had failed. Elena studied them carefully. Instead of trying to untangle them through brute force, she looked for relationships, for symmetry, for patterns that the aliens had overlooked. Her intuition guided her. She drew a series of gentle curves connecting distant symbols, lines that seemed almost simple to an outside observer but held hidden significance. The holographic board reacted instantly. Symbols shifted into alignment, lights pulsed rhythmically, and a subtle resonance filled the hall. The aliens were stunned. "It is working," one whispered, almost unable to believe it. The four-armed mathematicians' assistants paused, their calculations forgotten. Even the glowing alien floated quietly, its light pulsing slowly, as if acknowledging the unprecedented event. Elena's human approach had revealed something crucial. The equation was not meant to be solved through complexity alone. It required observation, creativity, and intuition. She had combined these elements in a way no alien mind had attempted. The solution was not brute force or computation. It was insight, human insight. By mid-afternoon, Elena had completed the connections across several major layers of the equation. The resonance was steady, almost musical, a pattern of understanding that filled the hall. The aliens watched in awe as the equation, once considered chaotic and impossible, revealed its hidden order. Some aliens began to murmur, recognizing the significance. "Could it be a human is unlocking what we could not?" one asked, hesitantly. Others shook their heads, refusing to believe it, but curiosity shone in their expressions. They were witnessing a phenomenon that challenged everything they had assumed about intelligence, logic, and creativity. Elena paused again, taking a deep breath. The final section of the equation was the most complex, the one that had defeated every species that had tried to solve it. She had studied it carefully, traced every hidden repetition, and mapped out potential relationships. Her human intuition told her the solution lay not in force or speed but in subtle connections, in lines no one else had considered. She reached out and traced the first line. The symbols responded immediately. A faint glow spread across the board, pulsing with a gentle rhythm. Encouraged, she connected the next symbols and then the next. With each connection, the resonance grew stronger, more visible, more undeniable. The aliens watched in silence, their disbelief giving way to wonder. They had never seen the equation behave like this. The patterns were clear, the hidden symmetries revealed, and the solution began to take shape. Elena's human approach, curiosity, creativity, and intuition, had unlocked a path no alien mind had found. By evening, the hall was quiet except for the soft hum of the holographic board. Elena had completed the major connections, creating a structure that revealed the solution's hidden order. The ultimate equation was no longer an impenetrable wall. It was a living, understandable pattern, responding to human insight. The aliens were stunned. Some were silent, absorbing what had happened. Others whispered to each other, hesitant but amazed. "She has done what we could not," one admitted. "A human has begun to solve it." Elena smiled faintly. She did not need recognition. The thrill of understanding was enough. The equation had revealed its secrets to her, responding to the unique way humans approach problems. Step by step, Intuition and observation had triumphed over complexity and brute computation. She looked around the hall, at the alien mathematicians now watching her with a mixture of awe and respect. Humans, she realized, were often underestimated. They were messy, unpredictable, and imperfect, yet their creativity and curiosity gave them a power no amount of intelligence alone could provide. Tonight, the ultimate equation was no longer impossible. For the first time, someone had glimpsed its hidden order, and that someone was human. Alina's work had proven that intelligence alone did not determine greatness. Perseverance, curiosity, and the courage to see differently were just as powerful, perhaps even more so. She closed her notebook, exhausted but exhilarated. The path forward was clear. The final solution was within reach, and tomorrow she would take the next step. Humanity had begun to make its mark on the galaxy in a way no one had expected. The hall was quiet now, filled with light and resonance. The aliens, brilliant as they were, had witnessed something extraordinary. A human had revealed the equation's hidden order. The impossible was no longer out of reach. Alina smiled, thinking of the journey ahead. She would continue, step by step, line by line, guided by her human intuition. The ultimate equation, long considered unsolvable, was beginning to reveal its secrets. And the galaxy was watching a human lead the way. The next morning, the Galactic Mathematical Council Hall was quieter than usual. Aliens floated and moved, but their energy had shifted. Something extraordinary had begun the day before, and it lingered in the air. Alina Hayes entered with her usual calm, notebook in hand, but her mind was racing. Today was the day she would attempt the final step, the step that could complete the ultimate equation, solving what no species had ever solved before. She set her notebook on the table, opening it to the carefully traced lines and patterns she had drawn over the last days. Each symbol, each arrow, each repetition was documented. Her human intuition had guided her so far, and she had learned to trust it completely. Step by step, connection by connection, the path to the solution was clear. Around her, aliens were already at work, though there was a sense of tension. The four-armed mathematician moved nervously among assistants, muttering calculations and gesturing at the holographic symbols. The glowing alien hovered above, its pulses slower than usual, as if holding its breath. The council, for the first time, seemed to recognize that something remarkable was happening. Alina ignored the tension. Her focus was total. The ultimate equation awaited, and she would meet it on its own terms. Not through computation, not through devices, but through human insight, curiosity, and intuition. She began by tracing the connections she had discovered in the previous days, linking patterns that had revealed the hidden symmetries of the equation. The board responded immediately. Symbols shifted slightly, lights pulsed along the lines, and the once chaotic holographic display began to settle into a subtle, rhythmic pattern. The alien stopped, astonished. "She is guiding it," one whispered. "How can this be?" Alina continued, undeterred. She traced the final section of the equation, connecting symbols that had resisted all previous attempts. It was delicate work. One wrong connection could disrupt everything she had built, but her human mind had learned to see what others missed. She followed her intuition, adjusting lines and observing the subtle reactions of the symbols. Slowly, a resonance began to emerge, a steady, harmonious rhythm across the entire board. The patterns she traced were no longer just on paper or in her mind. They were alive in the holographic display. The ultimate equation, once impossible, was now responding to her approach. It was as if the universe itself acknowledged the human insight guiding it. The aliens watched in awe. Even the council's most experienced mathematicians could not hide their astonishment. They had spent centuries studying this equation, employing their most advanced technology, their fastest calculations, and yet none had achieved what Alina was accomplishing with a simple pen and notebook. Could it be that a human is actually solving it? One alien whispered nervously. Others shook their heads, unwilling to accept it, yet unable to deny the evidence before them. The resonance was undeniable. Patterns aligned, hidden symmetries appeared, and the equation seemed to unfold naturally under Alina's guidance. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. She could feel the weight of history on her shoulders, the countless species who had tried and failed. But she also felt the excitement, the thrill of discovery, and the deep satisfaction of understanding something so profound. With careful precision, Alina traced the final connections. The board responded instantly. Numbers, symbols, and lines pulsed with radiant light, forming sequences that had never been seen before. The resonance grew, filling the hall with a quiet, almost musical hum. The aliens were silent, watching in disbelief as the ultimate equation revealed its full structure. It was complete. Every hidden pattern, every subtle connection, every long-sought solution had appeared, guided by human intuition and creativity. Alina leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. She had done what no species had ever done. She had solved the impossible. And for the first time in centuries, the ultimate equation stood solved before the eyes of the galaxy. The council erupted into reaction. Some aliens shouted in amazement. Others floated closer to examine the holographic board. The four-armed mathematician's arms shook with excitement, or perhaps disbelief, as assistants whispered urgently to each other. The glowing alien above pulsed with rapid light, its form flickering as if struggling to comprehend what it had witnessed. Alina's human colleagues, who had watched quietly from the side, cheered softly, knowing that humanity had achieved something extraordinary. She, however, remained calm. Recognition was not her goal, understanding was. Yet even she could feel a sense of pride swelling inside. The council president, an ancient alien with translucent skin that shimmered in the soft glow, floated toward Alina. Its many eyes regarded her carefully, and its voice carried a weight that silenced the entire hall. "Human," it said slowly, "you have done what we thought impossible. You have solved the ultimate equation, a task no being in the galaxy has ever achieved. Your insight, your intuition, your courage have brought clarity where centuries of calculation have failed." Alina nodded respectfully. "I only followed the patterns I saw," she said simply. "Sometimes the simplest connections reveal the greatest truths." The council president's eyes glowed faintly. "It is a truth we must now recognize. Humans are capable of brilliance beyond our expectations. Your species, creativity, persistence, and curiosity are strengths we underestimated. Today, you have shown the galaxy that intelligence alone does not define greatness." A murmur ran through the hall. Aliens whispered to one another, exchanging glances filled with newfound respect. Even those who had doubted humanity's capabilities before could not deny the evidence. A human had solved the ultimate equation, a feat once thought impossible. Alina smiled faintly. She returned to her notebook, carefully organizing her notes and diagrams. The aliens continued to study the board, some attempting to understand her methods, others simply marveling at the achievement. She knew that her work would inspire a new era of collaboration between humans and other species, a recognition that creativity and intuition could complement logic and computation. The hall slowly quieted, and Alina finally allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Humanity had proven itself, not through brute force or advanced technology, but through simple observation, curiosity, and a willingness to see what others overlooked. News of her achievement spread quickly across the galaxy. Communication systems on distant planets carried the story of a human who had solved the ultimate equation, earning respect and admiration from species far and wide. Scientists, mathematicians, and curious minds of every kind marveled at the discovery. Humans were no longer seen as clever but limited. They were now recognized as thinkers capable of extraordinary insight. Alina, however, remained humble. She knew that the work was not finished. Understanding the ultimate equation opened new questions, new possibilities, and new frontiers. Yet she also understood something fundamental. Humans were capable of tackling the universe's greatest mysteries, not by being the fastest or most precise, but by being curious, creative, and bold. That evening, as the stars swirled in the sky outside the council hall, Alina returned to her corner seat. She took a deep breath, reflecting on the journey. She had followed her intuition, traced hidden patterns, and solved what the galaxy considered impossible. Humanity had shown its brilliance, not through force, not through speed, but through the unique perspective of a single human mind. The aliens watched her quietly, now with admiration rather than skepticism. Some approached her to ask questions, hoping to learn from her approach. Others simply observed in awe, realizing that their understanding of intelligence had changed forever. Alina smiled faintly, thinking about the future. The ultimate equation was solved, but it was also a symbol of human potential, of curiosity, and of the courage to see what no one else could. The galaxy now knew that humans could rise to the challenge of the universe, not by competing with alien intellects, but by complementing them with creativity and insight. She finally reached for her lunch long forgotten and took a slow, satisfying bite. The hall buzzed with energy, light, and excitement, but Alina felt calm. She had proven something extraordinary, not just to the aliens but to herself. Humanity was capable of the impossible. As the stars twinkled outside the council hall, Alina Hayes sat quietly, notebook in hand, ready for whatever the universe would offer next. The ultimate equation had been solved, but the journey of discovery had only just begun. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, countless humans on distant worlds would learn of her achievement, inspired to explore, experiment, and innovate. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars, not just as observers, but as thinkers, creators, and solvers of the impossible.